Kartana mound with settlement. This mound was built in the middle of the first millennium. On the mound was a Curonian castle, which was conquered by Crusaders in 1253. There were pole-framing buildings in the grounds of the castle, and an embankment reinforced with stones and logs protected it from attack from the highlands. A couple of ditches were excavated behind the embankment, and another dike with a barrier was built between them. The castle caught fire once, and after the fire, the embankment was made taller and it was reinforced with tamped clay. As legend has it, the castle was ruled by the Samogitian king, who fought wars against both the Russians and the Swedes. Once, both enemies' armies attacked simultaneously. Being unable to agree which army should attack the castle first, they started battling each other in the Minya valley. As the commander of the Samogitian army was watching the battle from the castle, he shouted to his subordinates, "Veiziekiet, karetena!" Look, a battle is going on. For this reason, since that time the area has been called Kartana. St. Lawrence Church Complex of Kalnalis. There was a chapel as early as the 17th century on a highland promontory called Kalnalis, situated on the edge of the rural land of Klausgalva. After its collapse, Duke Andrei Oginski built St. Lawrence Church, the branch of Salantų parish. On 17 February 1801, the future bishop of Samogitia, Motiejus Kazimieras Valančius, who was born in the nearby Nasrienai village, was baptized in the chapel. In 1882, the church burned down after being struck by lightning, but in 1883 it was restored thanks to the efforts of the priest Simonas Jucevičius and parishioners. Logs were prepared for its construction in the forest of Klausgalvai, right in front where the church had formerly stood. After the church was built, a settlement consisting of several houses grew up, which soon separated from Klausgalvai. This settlement was originally called Kalnalis Hamlet. In later years, it became Bažnytkaimis, a village having a church, and now it is a village. In 1926, the St. Lawrence parish of Kalnalis was founded. St. Virgin Mary's Assumption Church in Salantai. The first Catholic church in Salantai was built in 1630. In 1724, a new cross-planned church with 5-sided apse and a turret of Gothic proportions emerged. It fell into disrepair, but from 1906 to 1911, one of the tallest and most beautiful neo-Gothic two-towered churches in Samogitia was built with the care of the pastor Canon Francis Urbanavičius and local parishioners. The church was designed in 1902 by the famous Swedish architect Carl Edward Strandman. The altar of the church, the benches, the tables and the confessionals were made by the master of the wood carving Jonas Balčiūnas, who lived in Salantai from 1912 to 1917. One of the altars features a painting of the Blessed Virgin Mary that is believed to have miraculous powers and decorated with metal framing, which was painted 1630s using the image of the Virgin of Guadalupe. Žvainiai Barrows, otherwise called Cock Mound, and Cock Chapel with a sculptural composition named Ave Vita. In the first millennium before Christ, the old inhabitants of the district were buried on Cock Mound. According to legend, in later years the hill was inhabited by priestesses who bred grass snakes for the Alko Hill temple. The inhabitants of the district brought the god of the temple his favorite sacrifice, a skilendis, the belly of a pig stuffed with minced meat, which is why the place called Skilengi. In the 16th century, Skilengi hamlet and manor were built near the hill, and in 1640 they were named Salantai. It is said that the first Salantai church stood on Cock Mound. When the church burned down, a temple was built in its place. According to other stories, a cock that had escaped the master's axe hid on the hill, crowed loudly and frightened passers-by. It was only after the chapel was built that the frightened noises stopped and the hill started being called Cock Mound. The interior of the chapel is decorated with a sculptural composition by the stone-cutter Vilius Orvidas, glorifying the Blessed Virgin Mary. Šilalė Bolda, also known as Didysis Kūlis, the Great Bundle, a stone with a flat-bottomed bowl carved into it, called the altar, and a second stone with a bowl carved into it. The stones lie on the plain near the Šakalė stream, where an old oak wood used to be and where until the 17th century there was an operational pagan temple. The hill was surrounded by a swamp, through which a hidden underwater cobbled road led to the village. The Great Bundle is the 5th largest boulder in Lithuania. As legend has it, a son of the wind is sleeping under the stone. Not far from the boulder, marking the place where the temple used to stand, is the altar stone with a flat-bottomed bowl carved into it. Next to the altar stone, there was a fireplace where the pagans used to burn birch, oak, pine, bark, juniper, amber, and resin. While the Christians were destroying the temple, the stone was thrown into a nearby pit that was later excavated. On the southern side of the hill, there was another temple which is still marked by a stone with a bowl carved into it. Both ceremonial stones were discovered by Vaclavas Intas, the founder of the Mosėdis Stone Museum, in 1970. Gintarai Manor, also known as Vyšnių Hill, Cherry Hill. A fortified settlement mound stood on the promontory of the highland in the 1st millennium before Christ, guarded from attack from the highlands of a defensive rampart with a wooden barrier. At the foot of the hill on the terrace of the Minia Valley, from the 1st millennium before Christ to the 10th century, there was a working pagan cemetery. In the 16th century, the first Kartana manor was built on the mound. It was called the Old Manor by inhabitants of Kartana. It was surrounded by 3 ponds dug in the valley of an unnamed stream, as well as a mill in the valley of Minia. At the foot of the hill to the west was the old settlement of Kartana. It is said that the landlord loved cherries and planted a huge garden of cherry trees next to the manor. In the middle of the 17th century, the Swedes burned down the mansion and the settlement, and in the spring the hill covered with white cherry blossoms. For this reason was given the name Cherry Hill by Kartana residents. Dauginčiai Mound and the Old Village Cemetery, Small Plague Cemetery. Dauginčiai Mound, otherwise known as Pilalė, is a hill in the Minia Valley. On the edge of the mound there is a circular hillock, once called Moon Hill by the inhabitants of the village. It is believed that buried in the hill there may be a temple used by the pagans of Dauginčiai Castle, which once stood by the river Minia. The site of the former temple is marked with a large granite boulder still sticking out from the ground. From the 16th century until the beginning of the 20th century, the village cemetery of Dauginčiai operated here on the plain between the river Pilalė and the river Minia. It is said that the victims of epidemics of plague and other infectious diseases were buried there, and for that reason the cemetery is called the Small Plague Cemetery. It is surrounded by a ditch and an embankment of earth and stone, and the memory of the dead is protected by a monumental cross and a couple of chapels with sculptures of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Imbarė Mound with outworks and settlement. This is one of the earliest mounds in western Lithuania and was built in the 1st millennium before Christ. The mound was guarded by an outwork around which, along the Salantas river and on the highlands on both banks of the river Pilkapius, there was a settlement. There were operating pagan temples with ritual stones both in the mound and village, and not far from them there was a burial ground. Imbarė Castle, a Curonian landmark that was first mentioned in 1253, stood on the mound. It was an important administrative, economic and defensive center in the Curonian county of Ceklis, and was where the Duke of the county lived. Legend has it that the place was named after the daughter of the lord of the castle, Imbarė, who was cursed by her mother. The also magician world in Imbarusi means cursed, for having loved and liberated an imprisoned crusader. The castle was abandoned after the Curonian rebellion of 1260 to 1267. From 1969 to 1989, the mound was excavated by the archaeologist Vytautas Daugutis.